Okay, so I just got back from the 250th YCS in London, and I wanted to talk about what I played, why I played it, and my general thoughts both before and after. Mostly to just clear my own thoughts, but I thought it might be useful for others to see. So obviously I played Mathmech, as I have my stuff here, and my thoughts going into it for why were I came to the conclusion that it was probably about the third or fourth best deck. I thought that both Kashtira and Sprite were clearly better than it, but I wasn't practiced with the new Sprite stuff, and I'm unconvinced by its follow-up, particularly with the Melty versions. Kashtira I do not enjoy playing, both on one end or against, and Runic, which I thought was the other one, potentially for top 4-ish deck in the format, I just couldn't find a version that I really vibed with. People obviously will then question why not branded, but branded has its own issues, and I think I was vindicated both personally and in wider play rates and results that branded was simply not the right thing to choose right now. I also could have brought Sword Soul, but again, I'm not very practiced on it. I don't enjoy playing it that much because, similar to Kashtira, it's incredibly telegraphed. So, how did I want to play Mathmech? I don't think it's a particularly exciting deck, particularly when you're going first. Especially now that Kashtira can rip your extra deck, really limited in your ability to toolbox because of how tight the extra deck is. But you have a consistent and strong line going first and second, and you can, with a couple of the changes that I made, actually grind pretty well. So I'll start with my record through the event. I'm going to talk both about the main event on Saturday, which I didn't make day 2 unfortunately, and also the 3v3 that happened on the Friday as well, just for a bit of broader context, a bit larger sample size. So at the 3v3, I beat Kashtira 2-1, I beat Anchuria Runic 2-1, and I beat Sarctic Therion 2-0. Not sure what was up with that deck, but it existed. And then in the main events, I beat Branded 2-0, I lost to Kashtira 2-1, I beat Labyrinth 2-1, I lost to Eldritch 1-2, or realistically lost to Skill Drain. I beat Branded 2-0, I beat Traptrix 2-0, I lost 2-1 to Runic Juria twice, and again beat Branded 2-0. So I'll go through the list and talk about what the different ideas behind each individual part are. It's not the most exciting list, but there are a few differences that people probably want to see. So, 3 circular, 3 diameter, 2 addition, 2 subtraction, 2 sigma, 3 exceed, 3 Nibiru, a Dogoran, a Gamciel, 3 Ash, a Vela, 3 Eclipse, 3 Small World, 3 Silent Mining, an Equation, a Call by the Grave, and then for the traps, 3 Impermanence, and 2 Superfactorial. 2 Superfactorial is not standard, but I'll go over why I thought it made sense to do, and I think it really paid off. So. Okay, so I'll go through the general card by card and why you play each one and what its main value add is. So circular, this is your main starter. Obviously you want to play 3 of these, or more realistically, you play 9 of these. Small World, of course, can get other things, but its primary use in the deck is guaranteeing UC circular often and frequently. After turn 1, it's substantially less powerful, but it's still integral to your combos due to its ability to search the spells and traps. Generally, with it, you want to be sending Sigma so that you can bring it back and such one of the super factorials. But there are other lines, and don't just tunnel vision into that standard play. Then we have Diameter, which I think is probably the best strip for the Heart and Soul of the deck. If you want to protect your plays, you are going to do it through the negates that Diameter gives to your Mathmech Xyz monsters. And in addition, because you search it off Circular at the end of your combo, it is your guaranteed follow-up, which you can just immediately, if it resolves, go into Alan Burton to protect anything future you do. You need to play 3 of them if you're playing a Mathmech deck rather than a Mathmech something else deck. Then the 2 addition and the 2 subtraction. These are functionally 4 of the same card. You could play more or less if you wanted. I found this to be a good ratio of extenders. Previously I was on 3 addition because it's marginally better, because you could target things with less than 1000 attack, but realistically they're just free specials that you have as long as there's a monster on the field. If you don't have access to Circular, your one card combos no longer exist, so you need to have 2 card combos, in which case you're basically looking at any normal summonable Mathmech plus additional subtraction or parallel exceed. So you want to have them available as much as you can. Then after that you have 2 Sigma. Summons from Grave enables your 1 card combo and is fine to draw because you can just use it from hand if you need to, as well as just normal summoning it. It's also a good pitch off Signet Mining because it allows you to go for a line with Circular, where if you pitch this with Signet Mining, you can then Circular send Diameter, guarantee you have 3 Mathmechs in Grave before you have to worry about whether your Alan Burton is going to resolve. Gets banished frequently, that's why you kind of need to play 2, and it's also a good follow-up, because if your monster is cleared, you guarantee you have a 4 on field. You don't even need to activate your Diameter in order to set up the negate. Then you have 3 Exceed. 3 of them because it's really nice to draw, especially on like turn 3, because you can just make Splash Mage immediately go into this, not have to use any extenders or even commit to Circular while you try and set up your access code. In addition, quite a lot of the time, one of them will banish face down as a small world bridge, so you really want the second one in deck if you draw the third. A lot of people would ask why not play other things that you can normal summon in order to make this like Almirage, but that really doesn't actually complete the combo, so you just want this as a bit of extension. Then we have the hand traps, so 3 Nibiru. Pretty self-explanatory what Nibiru does. Obviously, a lot of people are going to play around Nibiru, especially Kashtira with Rise Heart, but with the amount of other outs I have in the deck, the full just a Rise Heart pass doesn't bother me that much of the time. So having the insurance in there is extremely useful for when they do just decide to go off. In addition, it's a small bridge, just like Parallel Exceed, which just makes it useful to have in hand, because you can, for example, Nibiru into Effect Veiler into Circular, or you can Effect Veiler into Nibiru into Dogoran, which first one obviously very useful when you need to get Circular to going first. Otherwise, extremely useful Dogoran, because both 3000 attack, to actually out the Rise Heart. Second of the hand traps, we have the Ash. Extremely useful right now. You tend to hold it against Kashtira, which is the most matchup you need to wear of. For the Theosis, of course, but obviously you have Branded Fusion, it just ends the turn. But it's extremely strong, extremely versatile. I considered siding at one point, just because against Branded, but it was in place of Gamma, and it just wasn't feeling the same. There is the One Effect Veiler. It's mostly a small world bridge, but it's also just a good card sometimes. Not as good as Impermanence, because you can't use it to break the boards going second, but it's a light. It lets you get Ash into smaller to Asata, it lets you use Nibiru to get between any 2 light Mathmechs. It's any 2 light Mathmechs, sorry. It's just useful to have. And then, of course, the 3 Impermanence. It's incredibly powerful hand trap right now. And where you use it depends a lot on the combos that your opponent is going for. For example, you can hold it for Rise Heart, but if they make Shangri Era, you just go straight for the Rise Heart specifically. so they cannot activate the Shangri Era and get the Arise Heart on there, nor make any more rank 7s. Very versatile, very powerful. Also, just good setting first because you'll always be taking something. It helps you hide where your super factorial has gone as much. Then the not hand traps but other non-engine are the two kaijus. Which you have doesn't matter massively. I went for these two because they can small world into themselves. For example, you can go Nibiru, because 3000 attack into Dogoran, and then level 8 into Gamciel. And you can do the same with Paralix Seed, because that's another level 8. You could consider playing Jizukiru. I also played that for a bit, but again, its level was a bit inconvenient, and with Effect Veiler and Nibiru both in the deck, the small potential doesn't outweigh how easy it is to get to these. Obviously, you can often side them out, but sometimes you leave them in because if they just scramble to assemble something, you can just slap down a turtle and you're pretty much guaranteed to OTK at that point. Then the non-engine of the spells, we have the Book of Eclipse. Again, more outs to Kashtira, extremely useful. I would consider playing Book of Moon now, but I'll get onto that later. Obviously, it's just effectively board wipe, and because you have links, this is a lot more useful going first than it is against other decks, because if you're passed with general 3 link monsters on board, they summon something, you book it, and you don't have to care about your own board in the slightest. Then we have the Silent Minings, mostly used to add circular, but you can also use it to grab other extenders, notably not Parallel Exceed, which is why I generally prefer Small World, and in addition, Small World isn't required to go neg1 for cost, which means it's just generally more useful, even though Silent Mining can sometimes fight Graveyard Axe setup, which is nice. But then, of course, another star is the aforementioned Small World. This can get you to basically anything. I think any monster in the deck, except for Parallel Exceed specifically, gets you straight into Mathmech Circular, and if you've got access to Exceed, any other Mathmech is anyway full combo. So that specific thing lacking is fundamentally fine. Then we have the Call by the Grave. Less powerful than it used to be, but a lot better than it was in Tearlament format. You know, everything's dodging it, but yes, it ensures that your Ash Blossom resolves, so your Silent Mining resolves through Ash, as well as just being generally useful disruption. It's just a powerful card. Then the targets for Circular, we have one equation, extremely useful going second, because it's just an extender, or if you open the super factorial anyway, you just get a free guy. Significantly less powerful, but it's nice to have around as a secondary option. And then the big one is the 2 super factorial. Most lists are on 1, but I really wanted the additional grind game, and it paid off. I'll talk about that later. It also helps you to play through hand traps, because if they Ash your Alan Bershan and your Circular, sorry, or even both, because you have this in hand, it's not likely you're missing anything as part of your combo, because you've got a good chance of just opening one anyway. And in grind games, the fact that you can now just, even if you can't OTK with access code, you can just sit on access code, clear their board, and they still have to play through at minimum 2 interruptions, is just extremely useful. So, and then I'll go on to the extra. So as I mentioned, the extra deck is a lot more limited than it used to be. I had to cut out some of the cards that came up either infrequently but useful when they did, or just had broad, general useful applications. So it's no longer as toolboxy as it could be, and you're kind of locked into a singular game plan, but you're still able to accomplish that game plan incredibly efficiently. So to do that, I've got 2 Parallax Seed, 2 Prime Method Inflation, 2 Alan Bershan, 2 Access Code. All of them essential to resolve, and my hot take is probably with this build you want to play 2 even if Kashtira didn't exist, but given that it does, they're extremely important. And then 1 Appaloosa, 1 Transcode, 1 Update, 1 Splash, 1 Wicked, 1 Masquerena, 1 Disciple, 1 Devotee, and Lingeribo. So walking from the bottom up, Lingeribo protects you from things like evenly matched and infinite impermanence. Particularly, often you'll make it after Wicked, and because of that, you can just ensure that your search for that resolves once you've got it set up. If they decide to hold the imperm that long, it's unlikely, but it does happen. Secondly, you can just use it to make Parallel Exceed with anything if you've already gone through the Disciple line. Sometimes this will be left in your extra deck if you don't open with Circular exactly, and that's useful. Also, it's a trap negate. If you play against Labyrinth, you just save it for when they flip Gozen or whatever. And because it tributes of cost, it also gets around things like Skill Drain. Also, then we have Devotee and Disciple, which obviously go together. You don't normally tribute Devotee with Disciple's effect, but you do in certain situations. You're mostly just using it to set up that it is co-linked. You'll be tributing it with Alan Bershan, and that's how you end up with just a whole bunch of link material, even if you're locked to 2s. But one of those 2s is Masquerena, so you can just go straight into Appaloosa anyway. You'll generally be making your end board be this, with the Wicked underneath. So this gives protection, and these are your interruption, essentially. Everyone knows what Masquerena does, really powerful card, but the real star is actually Wicked. Not only does it give that interruption, but also if you have used your Lingeribo negate, banished of tributed for cost, and you've still got 2 zones here, or potentially the Masquerena there, you can then special your Laplation with Superfactorial on your opponent's turn to your Wicked zone, and then you can chain 1 Laplation into Wicked, so that you cannot get negated on your Laplation without on-field or targeted effects. The follow-up is also extremely useful because you just search yet more follow-up. Generally, you'll get a second Sigma off this, which you'll have 1 engraved, 1 in hand, and if you're and allows you to extend, for example, if whenever you put EMZ is popped or one was already banished through, I don't know, DD Crow, or just having to leave the field due to a combo line that requires that, because that does come up. Then we have the Splash Mage. Considering playing 2 is entirely reasonable. It's extremely good for your link climbing, of course, and it's why, along with Update Jammer, of course, basically any 3 Cyberses is an OTK. Updates should not be banned, no matter what Mount Fuji says. Just Cyberse lacks finishes otherwise entirely, just like it lacks any meaningful endboard interaction. These are your main routes to making this. Transcode doesn't come up as much. Transcode, you'll generally be making it on sort of turn 5. If they stop your access code by, for example, summoning Magnamut in your battle phase, so you just go into that. You can then go transcode, target update jammer after that to bring it back, but mostly you want to be using the Splash Mage as your earlier combo to get into update jammer, just so you have the transcode to fall back on. If it not for the grind game, transcode would be genuinely cuttable. Its protection effects just don't matter frequently, and it is mostly just there for the grind. Appaloosa, your main target to make off IP, though in certain circumstances you'll make something else. I used to play Avamax, but I had to cut it for the second access code, because Scarecrow Cashier in particular just sort of runs over it and it gets its effects, and essentially that just ends it and makes it irrelevant, because very few other things have as much as an out to the things you can make of it. Then we have 2 access code. Obviously best thing in the deck for OTKs, and what your main game plan is going second. But again, also if you're either on turn 3 or even turn 2 and you break their board, quite a lot of the time you can just sit on access code and superfactorial, and a large person plus a send 3 and a negate will carry you, and you can just attack again afterwards. Second, again, very important for that because you want to grind. There isn't any other way you can really clear the board because Sigma coming back Cyberse locks you, as do all the other extenders. So you just kind of get stuck otherwise because you can't make Zeus. And that's why I'm not playing Zeus. Alan Bershon, this card is completely insane. It's not just searching for your diameter, though that's your main thing going first. It also searches your trap if you couldn't grab that off circular for whatever reason. And also it's what you use to tribute your devotee in order to summon something back, which again can trigger your circular if you're using it later. In addition, it's the easiest way to get a negate when you're trying to OTK, because you can make it with diameter very easily, then detach it and it's already gone. Furthermore, it can also search Denko Sekka, which you'll see on the side later, which isn't always, but is frequently just the end of the game against trap decks. And then finally, Tuloplation. This would be a reasonable choice even if Superfactorial was only at 1 in the main deck, because the second Loplation you can quite often make going second, like traditionally with 3 monsters. It was against the third branded player. They were on the keeper package to make Dragoon. You bait out the first negate. I negated with Alan Bershon, but that meant that I was a sitting duck if they had a nib in hand or whatever. So you just hard make Loplation, send the Dragoon away because it can't be put back to code anyway, and they couldn't stop that because it not only had a second negate from diameter because that inheritance is not once per turn, but also got rid of their unaffected, indestructible boss monster that they worked so hard to put up. But with 2 in particular, it wins you the game. What won me the match against Labyrinth was when game 3, I broke their board, set up Superfactorial. They sat their guys, broke my board back. At which point I popped everything in access code, including, and they blocked it. But I was able to set Superfactorial and just hand ripped them, so that they could not play on turn 5. And that wins you games so frequently. The side is probably the least exciting bit, but there is good reasoning for all of it and probably mistakes made. But, that's what I'm here to talk about. 3 Ghost Spell, this is mostly for branded, but it also comes up against things like Maturia to stop expulsion along with Call by the Grave. Just a useful hand trap now. I mained it at one point before cutting it for the Eclipses, but it's good. 1 Denko, you only need 1 because it's searchable off both Alan Bershon and Small World. I only actually summoned it once all weekend, and the one time they did, the opponent had evenly matched plus Eldritch in their opener, so they just evenly me and then set the Denko. Inevitable, but that's a one-off in testing Denko solos, trap decks. It's that simple. Played triple Forbidden Droplet. A lot of people are off Forbidden Droplet right now because it's bad against Kashtira. And my answer to that is don't side against it against Kashtira. Obviously, yes, it's bad against them, but it's great against everything else. My win against Trap Tricks. Again, I'd gone through the second Loplation and Superfactorial because I was going second. They ended on they went into that, made Pinguicula, and went to attack. I just went Droplet, send Small World, and that was game because they attacked into it and weren't expecting Droplet. It's just really powerful to have mass negation because one of the other things this struggles with, because I don't want to play Dark Ruler because I want to OTK, big negate of boards and stuff like Adventure Melty Sprite can be an issue, so you can just Droplet them. In addition to that, the books help with that because you can set the Griffin Rider. so it cannot negate because it needs to shuffle back in order to negate. Then I played 2 Book of Moon. I would probably have swapped these with the Eclipse, putting the Eclipses inside and the Moons the main. It's just really powerful for dealing with Kashtira particularly. It's better going first than Eclipse, even if Eclipse is better going first in this than in most other situations, but Moon's just so strong. And then 3 evenly matched, just for breaking stuff. Wins the game against back rows, of course, and then, of course, 3-dimensional barrier. When it gets branded, it isn't as good as people think against stuff like Kashtira, but it's good. It's the best going second thing now, even if Kashtira doesn't personally bother it. But you can generally beat Kashtira going first anyway because your engine just clears their stuff. It's mostly the grind with Birth that kind of screws you over. So, the matchups that I had, my general thoughts on it were Branded is completely free. I did not drop a game against Branded the whole weekend. It's just so easy to deal with what they have going right now because most of the time they'll be making Mirror Jade and then either Branded Banishment into something like a Dracos Tepelia or into Branded Red into Chimera. So basically, if you have an extender, you can play through the generally only 2 interruptions they have, as well as if you have stuff like the Ghost Bell, you can just negate the Branded Red and they just kind of sit there looking confused at you. And because you're OTKing the Mirror Jade's destroy thing, doesn't really bother, and because everyone's off Bestials, even in Branded now, you don't tend to get interrupted much on that respect either. Furthermore, you can again just make Super Factorial, make them waste resources when they try and put Lost down, and then you quite often time you just rip the Branded Fusion out of their hands anyway, and they don't know what to do. The Kashtira is generally pretty good for this deck. I lost my one in the main event against it. I could have won that game, potentially, but the play that I had to do would have made only sense knowing specifically what their hand was. But generally the match, it's got a good Kashtira matchup because you just put up a lot of interactions and then you can just clear their board population going second, pop everything. But you have to draw it out to a Rise Heart. Good news, there are in the main 11 outs to Rise Heart. There's the 3 Impermanents, there are the 3 Book of Eclipse, there are the 3 Small Worlds to search the 2 Kaijus. That's 11 outs in total. You'll generally see at least 1, often 2. So, what sort of things that I struggle with most of the time? It was more Naturia Runic. Obviously, you'll notice in this side deck, there just isn't hard back row removal. My most thought behind that was just evenly matched, was going to have to solo, and most of the time it did. But while I expected Runic to be strong, I didn't expect it to be represented as much as it was. I underestimated it on that response, and I would definitely be playing Cosmics on the side for that. Probably over Dimensional Barrier, although I might play a couple of Dimensional Barrier, maybe cut a Droplet as well. I don't know, but yes, the lack of things like Cosmic were a mistake, and I can make a similar sort of case for things like Lightning Storm. Just clearing front or back row in 1 card is useful, though that does obviously lose to Hugin, so I'm unconvinced about that. Similarly, like Feather Duster would have been useful to have against the Labyrinth games where they just set 5. Other omission was more in the extra deck, was the aforementioned Avramax, which I didn't think was that standard anyway, but was extremely useful as an alternative option for Masquerena. Again, you could play Nightmare Unicorn instead, just as another target. Obviously, but effectively I was locked into Appaloosa just because of space reasons. What I ended up cutting was actually Decode Talker Heat Soul. In addition to that, I don't think Heat Soul is worth the opportunity cost most of the time. If you're making Heat Soul, you're generally no longer making Wicked, though you can in certain situations. And I am the follow-up that you get from Wicked, where you just get Diameter, is so strong that I don't think you want to miss out on that, essentially. Furthermore, Heat Soul doesn't do that much. Obviously, you're playing a fair few hand traps in here, but obviously you don't want to nib your own board. It's fine, but it's not ideal. So that really only leaves 3 Ash, 3 Imperm, and a Veiler as the hand traps that you want to see going first. And drawing into Imperm with Heat Soul is no use at all. So you're not drawing that many hand traps with Heat Soul, and it's just not worth the opportunity cost when you could guarantee that your opponent's stuff is going to go through, get to be got rid of by Loplation, or just because you have the second super factorial, you can grind. And that won me a lot of games that just making Heat Soul and hoping it was enough would not have done. So what weaknesses did I find throughout the weekend playing? Evenly matched, if you can't get to Lingaribo, is a problem. Sometimes Superfactorial will just try to solo the game for you, and it's great when it does, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And though I mentioned there are lines to get your combo on, even if you don't open Circular, if you open an Extender plus a normal, that often doesn't let you get Lingaribo, and you have to just make Wicked Masquerena. And that leaves you broad to evenly. One thing you can do to play around that is the Loplation negate. But if you do that, you have to commit to Loplation without sending anything apart from hand. And even with Lingaribo, the only way to play around the second evenly matched is to go, if they go chain 1 evenly, you go chain 2 Lingaribo, chain 3 Heats Superfactorial, so that you then, by the time they can get round to activating it evenly, you can negate a Loplation. But again, you lose a lot of value of your Loplation when you do that. Other thing that is kind of weaknesses are, for the same reason, both the Shizu Shufflers and Bestials. I didn't see many of either of them, but I saw a few Bestials in Branded, and in my round 9, I played the Nashiri Runic. That was actually Ishizu Nashiri Runic. And if you don't draw Bell, you just lose against the Keldo and Mudora. Against Bestials, it's mostly fine, because they'll generally be trying to Bestial your Sigma out of the grave. In which case, if you drew literally any extension, you just don't care. And when they're trying to use them to interrupt your Superfactorial, if you're against Branded, and particularly if you know they're on Bestials, go into Appaloosa first so that they just can't summon them, and then you can just ensure that it resolves, or just draw Bell. It's fine. Just draw Bell. Secondly, Arise Heart. I had 11 outs in the main. Sometimes it does not work. Even if you draw multiple of the outs, is often not enough. I had one game where I opened Imperm and Eclipse. Sorry. Eclipse. Small Worlds and Eclipse were the 2 outs that I had in my hand. Obviously, I want to use the Small Worlds to search Extension, because the only engine card that got me going in my hand at that point was just Circular. So, and what I ended up going for was Eclipse. They changed Lance so that I couldn't set the Arise Heart. So I went, okay, I'll have to use the Small World. Grab Dogoran. They stood on, and then they on Resolution banished Big Bang with Scarecrow Kashtira to summon Fenrir from under it. So that means as soon as Circular was on field, they just banished it, and I couldn't extend through that because I said I had no other engine. If I had done it the other way around, so just searching the Kaiju first, forcing them to go Fenrir, then eclipsed them, I could have played through that, but that plan does not make sense unless you know specifically that those unknowns were of Lance, Scarecrow Kashtira, and Kashtira Big Bang. But yeah, they have, even if you have outs to a Rise Heart, they have outs to your outs, and sometimes they will simply draw them. Because if Rise Heart is out, you just cannot play. Circular is turned off because it sends for cost, so it's not that you can show, oh well, I'll lose the Circular. No, you just can't play Circular. Under a Rise Heart and Cyburst deck, Dice in a Graveyard is extremely common. The other thing I alluded to earlier was the Book of Moons versus the Book of Eclipses. I would definitely be maining the Moons over the Eclipses. I don't know if other non-engine would be better, but Book of Moon was just extremely useful throughout, because your opponent doesn't get the flip back up. Not only is the drawing a problem when you go first, but also against Kashtira, sure, they special defend it, you Book of Eclipse it. Great, you stop their turn, but they're flipping up, drawing one, and getting a banish on your turn for free. Book of Moon's just not great. So Book of Eclipse is just not great in that respect. Maining Book of Moon, siding the Eclipse, I think would be a lot better, even if it is theoretically lower impact. Um, those are my main thoughts on it overall. I still think it is the third or fourth best deck, depending how you count. I think my take of Branded's not that great, which I got to by playing the deck for a while and just not being impressed with its lack of extension, is probably true. Uh, but this is a pretty straightforward deck, though it takes a lot of skill to break boards sometimes. I don't think it's as good as Sprite, I don't think it's as good as Kashtira, and I don't know if in aggregate it's better than the runic varieties going around. Probably not, but I don't know if there's any single runic deck that's better. I do think it is one of the best decks right now, and is still not being talked about in a way that really respects it. It's not the most exciting deck, but it is extremely efficient at what it gets done, and I think it performed well and did not let me down very much. I hardly ever bricked the whole time. Cool, that is my thoughts on Mathmech over the whole weekend.